Alright, so in our last video we opened a new document and we created some guidelines, and now we're going to use those guidelines to create a background. And it's a pretty simple background. Everything's just going to be a square with a fill color. In Illustrator we do have layers. So over at the right in our Windows palettes we should see layers. If you don't, you can go to Window and choose layers, and then it should open up the box. This works a lot like Photoshop. However, you can have multiple objects in Illustrator on the same layer. In fact, you could build the entire project on one layer if you wanted to, and everything is considered an object or an asset, and it'll have a stacking order, so you can change the which ones are in front of which. We'll show you that maybe a little bit later. Another way we can arrange things is to have things in layers. So I'm going to go ahead and double click this layer to change the name, and we'll just call it background. And it's one that has the guidelines on it. So these guides are now part of the background layer. And you could have just the guidelines on its own layer if you wanted to. So I'll show you what that looks like. I'll just name this guidelines. I'll lock the layer. I'll create a new one, call that background, and I can move the background below the guidelines. Does it have to be? No. But now if I want to turn just guidelines off, I can, and I can create something else on the background. And that might be the better way to do it. A lot of times it's good to work in layers so you can turn things on and off, or you can lock things on the layer so they can't be accidentally selected and moved or anything or edited. So I'm now on the background layer, and the first tool I'm going to use is called the rectangle tool. And this is pretty simple. I take my cursor on the document. I'm going to put it at an intersection point on the guidelines. I'm going to click, hold, and drag a rectangle till I get to the other corner. And then when I'm there, I can let it go. Now, mine happens to have no fill and no stroke. Yours is probably white with a black stroke. So I'm going to go ahead and change that so it looks a little bit more like yours. Or maybe you got something entirely different. But more than likely the default the very first time is going to draw a white box with a black stroke. So let's take a look at some of these characteristics. So first we have the white fill color. We can't see the white fill color because the background of the paper is also white, but it's there. You can see that it's white. And as we choose the rectangle, all you have to do is have this black selection tool, and you can click on anywhere on the rectangle and you get it selected. And the very first thing I'm going to change is the color, and I have things in CMYK, so I can just choose something. We'll go 65 cyan, and that's good. I get this light blue color, but I've got this black box and I don't really need the black box, so I'm going to change the stroke color. Now to be able to edit the stroke color, I have to come down here to my swatch tool and click on the what looks like a hollow square. That brings the stroke to the front, and I'm now editing the stroke of that shape. I have to make sure that the shape is selected, and the way you know it's selected is you see these bounding boxes on the shape. If it's not selected, even though you can see the colors here, any editing won't do anything to this shape if it's not selected. So that's one thing you have to get used to in Illustrator, is make sure whatever you're trying to edit is selected. And you can edit more than one shape or asset on your document at a time if you like. We can show you how to select more than one object once we have a few objects. But what I want to do now is actually take out the stroke. Right now it has a 1-point stroke uniform and it's black. For now, I'm going to go ahead and choose this little none. It looks like a diver down flag, and that actually gets rid of the stroke. Now I'm still seeing these guidelines, and since I already have the guidelines there, and I've drawn my box to the guidelines, let's go ahead and hide the guidelines layer. So now we see a little bit more of what this looks like without the guidelines in our way. Alright, so this is looking pretty good, and this is just our simple background. So let's create a new layer, and we'll call this foreground. And we'll lock the background layer. By locking it, I can't select that background anymore or accidentally move it. So that's going to be helpful because it can be easy to accidentally select more than what you have going. I'll go back and make sure my foreground layer is highlighted. So much like Photoshop, to make sure you're working on the layer, you want to see that it's highlighted. Alright, so the next thing I'm going to do is just create some more shapes. So I've got a rectangle tool. If I click and hold this, I can change it to an ellipse tool. So I drew a rectangle, but now I want to draw a circle or oval type shape. If I hold the shift key, it keeps it to a perfect circle, but I'll go ahead and have a little bit of a wompy shape. Now right now this color has the same fill color tool, so I'm going to come to my swatches and I'm going to change it to white. Just like that. And then to deselect that shape, I can either click away from the object and now it's deselected, or I can come up to select and choose deselect, and then Shift Option A is the keyboard shortcut for deselecting assets. Let's draw another one. I got another oblong shape, and notice that once I have it clicked, I can move it just like that, and it's still an editable shape, so I can grab parts of the shape to keep stretching it. Now this is vector art. If we were in Photoshop and we had set the resolution, we would be able to zoom in and eventually see pixels, right? Well, notice that in the vector program, no matter how much I'm zoomed in, it's always a crisp edge. There's no pixelation whatsoever. So right now I have this at 25,500% zoom, and it's crisp. Another thing I can do is if I have an asset selected, I can hold the Option key and you'll see I get the double arrow. I get a black and a white arrow. That lets me know I'm about to copy that asset. So I'm going to click, hold, and drag, and I can change the shape if I want. And I can always move things afterwards. So I have 1, 2, 3 shapes. So this allows you to do a little bit of drawing, and it makes it kind of fun. We're still on this foreground. I'm going to change my color to black. I'll zoom in a little bit. That's just Option plus sign. That's the same as Photoshop. And I'll change my shape to a polygon tool, so you can actually have more than one shape. Now if you want to change how many sides, you just single click on your document and you get a little window. So now I can change how many sides I get. Like I could do 9 and hit OK, and it makes that polygon shape, and it's editable. So go ahead and put that one there. I'll create another polygon shape, and maybe this one only has 8. And I want to make it black. When I have a shape selected, you'll notice that if you get close to the corner, you get the twisty arrows. That allows you to rotate a shape. So I'm going to create a few more small ones by copying and pasting and dragging and then resizing. So I think you're getting the hang of how these things work, and you can even change the shape slightly. I can copy this one over here, twist it some more, change any of the shapes that I want. Okay. And that's essentially the shape tool. You have different shapes you can use. You've got rectangle, you can do rounded corners, there's the ellipse tool, polygon tool, there's even a star tool. So the star tool allows you to create bursts. So you can do a 5-point star, but you can also do like a 30-point star. And if I change the outside radius, which also always has to be smaller than the radius 2, I could do 0.5 and 0.6, and you get sort of like a burst, right? And you can, maybe that makes it, ends up looking like a sun. And this is quite the cheerful snowman picture already. But that gives you an idea on the shape tool. Next, I'm going to show you how to use the pen tool to create your own custom shapes so that you're not locked into just the shapes offered in Illustrator.